My name is Renato. I am here representing Quintero. I'm going to ask some questions and let these two introduce themselves. I'm going to go first.
My name is Renato Quintero. I am the co-founder of Purple Horizons, a local innovation lab where we focus mainly on AI solutions for enterprise clients, and most recently developing a lot of things with conversational voice AI. So really looking forward to this. Very cool.
I'm Michael Casey, and the reason for this panel is the new hat I wear is the chairman of the Decentralized AI Society. We're pulling together, it's a trade association essentially of all the different protocols, players, and companies that are building a decentralized approach, self-sovereign approach to AI.
Gotcha. And so how did...
I think you all know. I will just add, I am a long-time investor in technology, so I have deployed capital across the spectrum of blockchain and now more recently AI-driven solutions. So very excited for these questions.
I feel like I should have said at the end.
You're fine.
It's okay. Real quick, how did each of you get involved in kind of like this whole AI blockchain type space?
So yeah, I've always, together with my business partner Gianni Dillard, I've always been kind of at the cusp of emerging technology, and we like to look at these technologies as Purple Horizons. That's how our company got its name. Like, if you think of transformational things that have happened with technology, the automobile, the internet, mobile, now AI, it's always something that's fascinated me. So I think being able to leverage technology to grow your business, to grow your portfolio, your investments is very impactful. So that's why I'm passionate about it.
I was talking with Michael earlier. You were at Coindesk, so yeah.
Yeah, I was at Coindesk until March, but I think there's two factors that let me here in this different role, and that is that one is I've been for a very long time interested and concerned about, to be frank, the Web2 world of sort of large platforms that have, I would say, in my measure, a negative impact on society. And I ended up writing a book that came out in March this year with a guy called Frank McCourt. And that book is really just a call to action for people to say we need to take charge of our data. The idea that you have these centralized entities throughout this Web2 social media era controlling our data meant that they're actually controlling us, because the data is your expression of yourself, right? In the digital age, you are your data, right? So the fact that somebody else would own that data and then be able to use it in a way that you don't even understand, it's all we lost our free will, basically, right? So that's the starting point for my concerns, and we had a chapter in that book about, you think this is bad in the Web2 era? Well, try bring this in the AI era, and it just goes all on steroids. So it's a very serious problem. That's the first starting point. The second thing is, I started just looking at what was happening with the AI space, and I saw the same exciting energy that I witnessed in the early days of Bitcoin and the early days of Ethereum. It is this wildness to this right now, and I always find those communities to be some of the most interesting to be involved in. There's massive problems to overcome. The technology is difficult, the coordination is difficult, but that's kind of what makes it exciting.
And where does your interest kind of come in for this like AI and blockchain convergence?
Well, I've always been fascinated with technology. I grew up in Palo Alto, and so my mom was an early-ish employee at Sun Microsystems. And although I try to fight it to the best of my ability, lo and behold, technology really just kind of sunk in as a fascination point forever. And so seeing blockchain for really the first time, like seriously exposed in probably 15, but I didn't take it seriously. I mean, I knew there was an opportunity there. 16, I got more interested, and it's just become more and more progressively how convicted I've been about the space. And then you take what's happened with AI, and AI, I mean, it's taking up all the oxygen in the room right now, but it's been with us in a rudimentary form for some time. But what's happened is these models have been able to advance in a paradigm and a shift in time, and the adoption curve is so just prolific right now. We don't fully understand, but we will look back in very short order and say this was a dawn of the new era of business, of society. Everything is open for interpretation now, because this will become ubiquitous in our daily lives. It will be not 5 interactions a day, it will be hundreds of interactions a day.
Where do you see blockchain adding value in terms of AI?
Well, we were just talking backstage. One of the things I think is going to be a significant problem going forward is just what's real, being able to tell the true from the false. And so having an immutable record that blockchain provides for at the intersection and being the foundational element of AI would definitely give me a level of comfort about interacting with these things. Because if we think fake news or deep fakes are a thing right now, it is only going to explode going forward. And so that is a great starting point. I think there are a litany of other really relevant low-hanging fruit examples. Healthcare is another one that comes to mind. The ability for these models to look at people's health records and do predictive and diagnostic suggestions as part of a robust healthcare ecosystem. We have a massive shortage of healthcare professionals in this country. So that can help address that from day one.
Yeah, I would agree with Erik. We were talking backstage about some of the potential applications. For me, one of the things that I'm excited about is like proof of service, right? These models are able to, with the pairing with blockchain, be able to prove that somebody did service, for example, a building. One of the things that we were talking about was the convergence of AI, blockchain, and IoT, like the Internet of Things, devices. And one of the things that you can imagine is, for example, in a building, you have HVAC systems, you have elevators, you have all these things that experience wear and tear. But with AI, you can have sensors that are constantly monitoring this data real time, doing it in a way that a human can possibly never do it, and then automatically go out, schedule service calls. And once that service call gets done, it goes into a ledger. It says, hey, this has been done. The AI sensors actually confirm that it's been done. And then you can essentially even have a payment go out to that service provider. I mean, there's a complete flywheel, an ecosystem for how you could use AI, blockchain, and IoT together.
Also, I mean, both of those comments sort of tend to focus at the application layer and the benefits to individuals of things like proof of service and so forth, healthcare. I think we're, for now at least, Deus is very interested in the infrastructure, the base layers, right? So we talked about data. So I mean, we need to move to a world in which we own our data, that we have the permissions, that we dictate how that data is being used, right? Because the future models are going to have to be provably associated with what I want, right? We're going to have these agentic structures, these AI agents operating on our behalf. You're going to want to know that it is listening to you and what you want. So data has to become identified, and we've got NFTs. We've got a whole variety of ways to recognize data as an asset. So that's a key part of it. Just the very idea that the models could be tokenized, the ownership of those models, the models and the creation of those models could be done collectively by a variety of players, institutions, is a very powerful idea for breaking down the monopoly, right? Right now we've got the 6 largest platforms. We know who they are. They're the same Web2 companies that dominated that era. They have $15 trillion in market cap, which puts them at 1/3 of the S&P, which is insane. And that is a source of power. That's currency. That's their currency to essentially acquire whatever technologies are emerging. We need to figure out how to tokenize the technologies. Be it the compute, be it the inference, be it the machine learning, everything. It's not easy, but that is the way in which we break the monopoly. And so, essentially, ownership is one of the use cases here. Data tracking, data proving, data ownership. There is a variety of benefits that come from just how do you bring a blockchain framework to the sort of collaboration of different models. And then there's just like payments. We're going to have atomic payments through the system. It's like AIs are going to be able to, they need the automatic settlement that a blockchain can enable, because if not, they'll be able to like front run the other model, right? So we have to have the ability to pay, and tokenized payments in a 24/7 environment is the only way to do that. So I look at this as what does the economy need at its base layer, and there's just so many different things. I think we tend to think about AI as the front end, what the consumer is doing, and all that's really great, but everything underneath it is actually the big problem right now.
When I think about AI, I think about, the narrative is usually like centralization. You have all this data coming in one place. When you think about blockchain, you think about decentralization. It's like the big term that comes up. So how do those two narratives coexist?
Well, I think you are looking at one of the leaders with a vision of what can be done. And I would look at projects like Morpheus, Study's another one, where you're basically taking these resources and you're parsing them out in a decentralized way where these agents are working, but there's no central point of ownership. And that to me is the most interesting, because to Michael's point, we give our data away right now, and one of the best lines, and I'm sure you've heard it, if you don't know what the product of a company is, you are the product. And that couldn't be more true in today's world, because you look at the profits of a Meta or a Google, the numbers on YouTube alone are insane. We are addicted to YouTube, and that's great for Google, but the problem is we are just giving away all of those analytics and all that data for nothing right now. And so there has to be a better mousetrap. And so seeing efforts like the two that I referenced, and then societies being marshaled, a coalition of the willing, if you will, are vitally important. And this is not getting enough attention. There should be 2 lead stories on every single news program every single day, and it's the national debt, and it's the impacts of AI in society. Those should be the leads every single day.
When we think about this coming administration, the first thing to say is that the next 4 years are going to, 2025 is going to look very different, or 2029 is going to look very different from 2025. So whatever we're doing, talking about the Trump administration, it should be in the context of the fact that our world is about to get turned upside down by this technology. So there's no one having these conversations. I just think that the other thing to remember is, so we have a technology that is sort of an element of the blockchain ecosystem, and that's deepin, right? This idea that we can have decentralized physical infrastructure networks. So we think there's a variety of them. There can be mesh networks like Helium, but one of the big ones is Filecoin, right? And Filecoin essentially are a decentralized storage system.
Which all Propy transactions are facilitated on.
And they should be, because that is a way to actually give the immutability to it, because it's not sitting on AWS and services, so you're not relying on this one player. That is going to be a fundamental piece of AI as well, right? So we need these deep-in networks to be out there, and here's why. This centralized AI model that you were talking about there, Renato, it might do fine right now for this current system where there's a bunch of us without access to ChatGPT, and we throw a bunch of queries at this one pile. But when we are moving into a world, this sort of agentic world that everyone talks about, where we have our own AI agents and they're doing everything for us. They're buying our houses, they are doing all of our transactions, they're deciding what we should listen to, what we don't, everything. The idea that all of those agents could be putting in an API call to, OpenAI's server in sort of wherever it is, Seattle or wherever, is going to be utterly impossible. The internet could never, ever handle that kind of traffic. So the only way that the agentic world will emerge is through edge compute. It needs to be pushed out to the edges, and our computers, our devices, our phones, our TVs, our whatevers will be doing it. You get folks in Silicon Valley scoffing at that, who say, oh, you just can't do that because you need to have 100 and they have to sit in a classroom, they have to do this neural network, and it's a convenient thing to say, but the bottom line is, how else are you going to solve this problem? The only way to do it is to push it out the edges. So that's where deep-in networks, that's where blockchain models for how we coordinate amongst these devices and use the excess capacity that we have in each of them is going to have to come into this. And there will be, and there are very smart people thinking about how you do machine learning in a parallel compute way, and how you use modular structures. Basically get off the drug of depending on NVIDIA's H100 and 200s as the only way to do this. There are creative people in the space who can figure out this challenge. It is engineering is difficult and decentralization is expensive. We all know that. But there are all sorts of interesting ways to approach this problem from a different perspective. And I think the smartest people in the room are the ones in crypto who've been doing this now for 10 years.
Just want to make sure we have more time, right?
You're good.
Okay, good.
They must be captivated by what we're talking about up here.
No, because it started flashing.
It's a hallucinating time clock. I think actually that's since I've been. It's a hallucination. So it's Sam Altman messing with us right now.
Okay, so something that I think about a lot is the kind of the experience getting people into blockchain ecosystems can sometimes be difficult. So how does AI aid that in terms of maybe personalization or like helping just onboard people into these ecosystems?
So, I mean, that's a great point. I firmly believe that AI is going to usher in an era of hyper personalization. Right? Like one of the big issues that you just brought up is like there's a lot of roadblocks and hurdles to get the average consumer onto blockchain. Setting up a wallet, private keys, public keys, like all of this stuff. And there's companies tackling that right now. Not a lot of companies have done an amazing job at it. Some have. But I think that's where AI agents can come in handy and do a lot of that work for consumers through that hyper personalization. So I think that's going to be one of the advantages of that. And I think once that layer becomes transparent to the user, I think that's where we really start to gain ground. Right? So if you start thinking about where we are in AI right now, I would wonder if we did a poll in the room, like how many people have used ChatGPT? A lot of hands, right? So 8 months ago, I was at a conference and I asked a similar question, and there were only a handful of people in the room that raised their hands, right? If we looked at that 2 years ago, and we were sitting at a conference, maybe if there was an engineer in the room, a software engineer who's working on machine learning or something like that, maybe they would have raised their hands if I would have asked if they were interacting with AI. So a lot of the UI UX is becoming very consumer friendly, and now all of us have the power to use AI. And I think through that AI implementation of blockchain, we could experience similar results.
So I absolutely agree. I think that one of the problems that we have often talked about is the UX of blockchain, and therefore the hurdle of that. I think one of the things that's actually really interesting, and it doesn't just apply to blockchains, it shows to every aspect of our digital lives, and that is the problem of the lack of interoperability. So think about your challenge of like, okay, I want to send a message to somebody on WhatsApp, and now, okay, you're on Telegram, like, should I go look at my Telegram account, and then it's a LinkedIn message, and like trying to keep track of all of that, right? That's a human barrier. That's our brains are incapable. That's what interoperability is a problem, or the lack of is a problem, because it's extra brain power that's needed to do that. We'll hand all of that brain power off to an AI, right? So the problem of interoperability, which people have been trying to solve from a technical point of view, at the base layer of the protocol, trying to make sure that this chain it has a bridge to that chain and so forth. You might actually be able to abstract that all away by just enabling it at the AI level. And so that could be with blockchain, as I said, it could be just with our devices and our Spotify lists versus our YouTube list and everything else. The AI just makes it much more seamless. So I think that's, when I think about its value, it's think of all of the tedious steps that you have to take in anything that we do. Real estate transactions are probably one of the most rich in terms of those tedious steps, and just machines doing it for you. That's where all the value, I think, starts to get unlocked.
The only equal asset in life is time. It's the 1,440 minutes we have each day. And if you were to really be diligent and track the amount of time that you are doing mundane tasks that could be accomplished by handing those innocuous interactions over to AI, the net amount of time that you would get back would be absolutely staggering. And so look at where we are right now. And my team uses AI as tools, and I have a small team, but they are wildly effective as a result of the tools that are there now. Fast forward 24, 36, certainly 48 months from now, I think it is going to be just shocking what we're able to accomplish. And I firmly believe that what AI and hopefully with the integration of blockchain will do for humanity, it will create a time of prosperity, the likes of which we could never possibly imagine. The challenging aspect of that is I do not mean prosperity that everyone's going to become happy and rich. I'm just saying there are going to be better tools to accomplish things than at any other point, and better tools to leverage your time than at any other point in human history. And that's one of my biggest concerns is the digital divide that could be created. Because if you think there is a wealth disparity or gap right now, it will only be hyper accelerated with the implementation of AI.
You know, one of the things you brought up when you were talking about your team is the fact that your team is actually using AI to their benefit and essentially turning themselves into superhumans. You didn't mention anything about getting rid of anybody on your team. It just augmented. So for you as a business owner, it was the equivalent of hiring maybe an extra 100 people just by empowering your team to use AI. Right? So I often like to say that, you know, AI isn't going to take your job or isn't going to replace you. Somebody using AI is going to take your job or replace you. So if there was one takeaway, I think, from the discussion that we're having is get involved, be curious, start using the tools. There are a litany of tools out there. Most of them have some kind of free access to them. Experiment, because it's gonna benefit you tremendously. And where we sit right now, kind of on this curve, this adoption curve, we're very, very early. I think if you get on now, you're going to ride an incredible wave of prosperity, like Erik was saying.
Okay, since we're in the good news part of this, I'll go there as well. I think there's a good intersection with the conversation that is the topic of this event, that's property rights. I think that if we combine the time-saving elements of AI, the capacity to innovate that it also therefore generates with property rights. So like think of property rights almost like as the base layer piece of this. The data that it refers to is the actual kind of asset. I now own that, and the property rights are proven to a blockchain like Propy that recognizes that. Now, I take my AI and I can build stuff now. Right? We often talk about this as Erik, that like throughout history we've had these moments when the transfer of a particular right, property right, to a wider class of human beings has led to this explosion in wealth. And we talk about the moment in Chinese history when Deng Xiaoping gave the right to own a home to millions and millions of Chinese, and that just was a huge driver of the Chinese economic miracle. The creation of the limited stock company idea at the end of the 16th century in Netherlands led to another explosion, right? Because you're transferring this right to much wider people, and when you do, they can innovate, they can build. Take all of that and put it on data, so turn data into a property right, and attach AI to it, and the idea of what could be created and the value that gets unlocked in that process is actually fathomable.
Yeah, you've been talking about data a lot, and you referred to the election. I mean, we just came off of a crazy election period, talking about media coverage, whether things were factual or not factual. We recently had a big data event. There is an organization that archives the entire internet and the history of the internet. And up until very recently, we could have said that was immutable, but they were hacked, and we don't really have a source of truth. And I think that blockchain and data convergence gives us that source of truth because the blockchain is immutable. You can't erase it. So if we had that data, a lot of this data living there, it would be incredible.
Yes, absolutely. That is the dream, right? And I think that the archive.org's DDoS attack is sobering, because I think IPFS were involved in aspects of that, which is Filecoin related entities. So not so they're involved in the attack. That came out wrong. But archive.org itself, I think, has it stores a lot of its data there. So there's scaling challenges that we need to be resolved. There are intersections between the storage, which cannot itself reside on chain, and then the mechanism to record those, which is where the blockchain goes. But I think when we start to talk about some of these other parallel technologies that are emerging. A really important one is confidential compute, and they call it secure enclave environments, or trusted enclave environments, TEE. So there's now capacity through certain cryptography to take a device, let's call it a storage device, and just be absolutely certain that it is locked. It is doing computation without any knowledge to break into it, or its capacity to do anything else. So there's worlds in which these technologies come together, where I think the scaling challenges that we've seen in terms of blockchain and deep-in networks like IPFS start to get resolved by the convergence of all these technologies. And that's when we get to this point where we can have this immutable record of truth, because that's the core problem.
You brought up a really interesting point about this whole gap that could potentially develop, right? You have the people who maybe are organizations becoming more productive because they're using these technologies and so on, like AI in there. But how do you narrow that gap? What are the things that exist out there, right? So if someone's eager to kind of innovate where AI and blockchain are converging, right? Where do they start, and how do we narrow that gap that you were talking about a little bit earlier?
Well, it starts unsurprisingly with education, and Ralph already referenced most of these AI resources that are available right now have a free interface. Blockchain, very much the same. It's not always readily abundant to individuals how to get involved, but get curious, because the tools and resources are there, and economics should actually not be the impediment. It should just be your commitment to want to learn, because to Ralph's point, if you don't learn this, you will be missing the train, and you will look back in very short order and go, good golly, I missed a seminal moment in human history where I could have been profoundly more effective as a human because of what's here now.
Anything to add?
No, I'll double down on that. Be curious. Go out, use it every day. Look at what you do both in your personal life, your professional life, and experiment with it. Start understanding how to be a better prompter. The better prompts you can write for all of these tools, the better output you're going to get. The old adage of garbage in, garbage out also applies to AI. You can ask ChatGPT a question in the same way that you would ask Google a question, but if you get really granular as to what you want, you describe, how you want them to perform, who they are, or what you want this agent to do, the output that you're going to get is so much better, so much more detailed. So just go out and experiment. Try something new every single day.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point that you, I read something about how kind of this next generation of very productive workers are actually going to be much more creative persons, right? Much more creative education, or pursuing much more creative education and so on, because of that output component that you said. Well, thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.